science enthusiasts. My name is Jason Zakowski. I'm a high school chemistry teacher and a science communicator, but I'm also the dog dad of Bunsen and Beaker, the science dogs on social media. If you love science and you love pets, you've come to the right place. Put on your lab coat, put on your safety glasses, and hold on to your tail. This is the Science Pawdcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Science Pawdcast. We hope you're happy and healthy out there. We're getting so close to the Christmas break, I think everybody's feeling it. As mentioned last week, the push right before Christmas for teachers is kind of bananas. We have so many projects and so many things wrapping up, and concerts and school events. It's a whole thing. Next week, Chris and I are going to be dropping off letters to Santa that I partnered, my high school students answered, and we're going to be taking Bunsen and maybe Beaker. That's going to be really adorable. We also shipped out more than 200 Bunsen stuffies to people all over the world. So that's super heartwarming. And the pictures people are sending of their Bunsens arriving is very, very cool. Okay, well, what's on the show this week? In science news, there's no bigger story right now that's happening all over social media, news. It's the fusion success. So I'm going to delve a little bit into that. In pet science, we're going to be talking about how the stress of a dog can actually be related to the stress of the dog owner. Our expert in Ask an Expert is Dr. Torah Kachur, who's a professor from the University of Alberta and has this really cool radio segment on CBC. I actually spoke with her at the March for Science, and it was really good to connect with her again. She's such a great speaker and an entertaining person. Hey, dogs, what does a nuclear specialist have for supper? Fish and chips. That's a good one. Okay, on with the show, because there's no time like Science Time. This week in science news, let's talk about the fusion reactor success. It's been all over Twitter. It's been all over even news. It's been one of the lead stories on our local radio. So everybody's paying attention. Okay, so what is the breakdown? Just before we get things too complicated, fusion is very different from fission. Fission is where you take something that's radioactive, like uranium, and it explodes or busts apart into two smaller elements, and the mass change is converted to energy, and it releases a lot of energy. One of the byproducts, though, is nuclear materials, which is radioactive and not necessarily great to be around. However, most of our society relies on fission reactors to produce radioactive materials that we use in medicine and a whole host of other things. Fusion is putting two elements together. Like what happens in the sun, our star, converts hydrogen into helium, and other stars convert it into heavier elements. But right now our sun is smooshing hydrogen so close together with other hydrogen, it turns into helium. And the amount of energy that releases is magnitudes more than fission. So along with the story, the researchers at the National Ignition Facility in Livermore, California, they've achieved nuclear fusion that produces more power than it required to jumpstart the reactor. And this is the first time there's been something called net energy production. This is a big deal because, we're not going to be hooking up iPhones and cars to nuclear fusion reactors anytime soon. The analogy that was made that I really like is before you can cook roast a marshmallow on a campfire, you have to be able to light the campfire. And this is the first step in roasting the marshmallow, if then that analogy makes sense. Of course, one of the big deals is that in fusion, you don't have those long-term, long-lived radioactive waste materials. Fusion doesn't produce any of that waste. It's very technical and beyond my ability to communicate this well to you, but the National Ignition Facility, they use lasers at wicked bananas high temperatures and under wicked pressure to cause a small pellet of fuel to go through fusion. The researchers stressed that the amount of energy that was produced is minuscule, like not even enough to light a light bulb. But it's a start. It's the start of at least producing more power than was put in. Fusion reactors are still a long ways away from like something that powers the world. They are incredibly expensive to make, and we may be decades to possibly, some naysayers say never, from scaling this up in such a way that it's useful. One of my favorite lines in the Tobey Maguire series of Spider-Man is when Doc Ock has the power of the sun in the palm of his hands. It's the whole plot of Spider-Man 2. The older folks would know what I'm talking about, and the youngins that are listening are like, Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man? Yeah, he was Spider-Man. And that's what Dr. Otto Octavius figured out, was how to do fusion. It would be very interesting if I'm still alive and it's scaled up to such a way that we do create a little miniature sun. The amount of energy that this would produce is so mind-boggling. You would have clean energy that produces very little, if any, greenhouse gases that would power the world. It would be fundamentally society changing. And that's why it's such big science news. Well, go fusion. That's our science story for this week. This week in Pet Science, let's look at a study from the Linköping University in Sweden. I hope I said that right. Sorry for you Swedes that listen to the Science Podcast. They looked at stress in dogs and stress in humans. It's pretty well understood that dogs can get stressed. Dogs do have stress, and they exhibit stress very differently than humans. I've seen Bunsen stressed before, and I've seen Beaker stressed before. Bunsen gets really stressed when we go to the vet. He doesn't like being confined, so that means he will not go into a tiny room. When he was a puppy, he hated his crate. We tried, and we got him crate trained. He hated it though. We had a soft shell crate, and he would roll it around like a hamster ball because he was a big puppy, and he would just smash into the sides of it and flip it. And then he would flip it and roll it to be with the people. Or he would get stuck and then he would cry. Oh my God, he was such a cute little puppy. So at a vet, when you're in that little room, right, like it's confined, Bunsen doesn't necessarily like the vet because it smells weird, and he gets stressed. So he doesn't cry, he just pants. and he's really cuddly, like he wants to be right on top of you, as if like this giant dog needs a protector. The only time that he gets that way is at the vet. So, dogs do get stressed. I'm not 100% sure what stresses out Beaker. Maybe being around a whole bunch of unfamiliar dogs. She's kind of a COVID puppy, so she's still not great with crowds of dogs. Maybe that. She doesn't get stressed out of people. She loves the vet. She can't wait to go to the vet and see the vet. And the vet's like, hey, I'm going to give you a needle. And she's like, great. I love needles. She's just so happy all the time. What did this study get into? Well, first off, the study suggested that a dog will mirror their owner's stress levels rather than the other way around, meaning that humans will mirror their dog's stress level. As we mentioned before in the Science Podcast, you can test for stress by testing for a stress hormone called cortisol. And they tested both the humans in the study and the dogs in the study. The study took a look at 25 border collies and 33 Shetland sheepdogs, and they were all owned by women. So this was a unique study, meaning that was gender specific to women. The dog owners and the humans gave hair samples to the researchers, separated by a few months, and they wanted to compare the dogs that competed in obedience and agility. So there's a little bit of things get messed up if some dogs are really active and some dogs don't with cortisol. So they wanted, maybe you're wondering, like, why are they all Shetland sheepdogs? Why are they all border collies? They all had relatively the same amount of activity. And they all were in competition trials. So they kept the job description of the dog relatively similar. Like a border collie that does rally training would be very different than a couch potato like Bunsen. Okay. And what they found was that in owners that self-identified as having lots of stress, and particularly stress at competition times, the owners had more cortisol, and the dogs also had more cortisol. In owners in the questionnaire that self-reported as having low stress in their life, and particularly having no stress at competition, the dogs also had lower levels of cortisol. So there was a mirroring effect. When the owner was stressed, the dog got stressed. And this is something that kind of makes sense because dogs are very in tune with our human biochemistry. They maybe don't necessarily feel what we feel, but they can smell how we feel. And when they smell that, that could change their stress level too. The researchers that set up this test are excited to test other dogs that aren't necessarily competition-based, test mixed breeds of dogs, test shelter dogs. So the whole area of stress testing for this research group is ongoing and continuous. The more we know about how we as humans affect our precious dogs, I think that's good. That's pet science for this week. Hey everybody, before we get to the interview section, here's a couple ways you can help the Science Podcast out. Number one, if you're on any place that rates podcasts, give us a great rating. Tell your friends and share it with people who love science and pets, like teachers. Number two, think about signing up as a member of the Paw Pack. It allows you to connect with people who love our show, and it's a way to keep the show free. Number three, check out our merch store. We have the Bunsen Stuffy 2.0. There's still some Beaker Stuffies left. They're adorable as well. Warm, cuddly clothes, and adorable drinkware. The link is in the show notes. Okay, back to the interview section. It's time for Ask an Expert on the Science Podcast, and I have Dr. Torah Kachur with me today, who is a scientist and a radio columnist and a lecturer at the University of Alberta. How are you doing today, Doc?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to talk to you. We've been following each other for a while on social media, and I spoke with you at this giant rally called the Rally for Science, like 4 years ago? Was it 6 years ago? It was pre-Bunsen. Yeah, it was more than 5. It was before Bunsen. So thank you for being a guest on the show.
Happy to be here.
Now, I gave it away. You're from the University of Alberta, but just for folks who are not from Alberta, where is the University of Alberta? Where are you calling into us from?
Well, I'm about an hour and a half north drive from you.
Yeah.
So I'm in Edmonton. I'm in Edmonton, middle of the prairies in Canada. And it's lovely. It's turning fall and it's great.
Now, have you lived in Alberta your whole life? Like, are you a transplant person?
I'm born and raised. You know what? My dad was born in Edmonton. His parents emigrated from the Ukraine in I want to say 16. So yeah, I go way back. And then my mom's side is 5th generation Canadian, but they're from the East.
Wow. Okay. So you're born and bred Albertan, just like me.
Born and bred. Yep. Just like the best of them.
So I introduced you as a doctor, like you've a doctorate. What's your education with that all about? Like what's your education in?
You know, I haven't moved far. I did my undergrad at the U of A in genetics.
Okay.
And then decided to stay on. I got a really cool opportunity with a really great project. It's something really I wanted to do in worms and C. elegans. And so I did my PhD in C. elegans at the U of A. So, and then, you know, I was finishing my grad school and I realized that there's a lot of admin when you start talking about, becoming a tenured track prof. And there's not a lot of jobs out there. And I was like, you know, this doesn't sound like it's right for me. I'm terrible at administration. And so I put my hand up to do a bunch more teaching. And then I just always got local gigs, been at McEwen University for a little bit, and now for U of A for a very long time.
So when you were young, were you into science and genetics and worms?
You know what? I was a total closet nerd.
Okay.
Like I actually looked at some of my, memory books that your mom or dad compiles and you put the little artwork from kindergarten and stuff like that in. Mm-hmm. In grade 2, I said I wanted to be an environmentalist.
No way.
Yeah, like crazy. I didn't even know that was I didn't know that was on my own radar. I look back at that and go, wow. So I was always really fated for biology. I used to carry around National Geographic book encyclopedias about mammals. Like that was probably grade 1. I was really into learning and knowing. My mom always says I like knowing more than learning, but you have to know both. And so I always was on this trajectory to science. But the thing is that if you knew me, and if you just knew of me, or like, we were acquaintances at school, you never would have known I was good at school. Like I just didn't really go to class in high school. I didn't really
Oh,
try.
no.
I know. And I played on the basketball team and volleyball and stuff. So everyone just thought I was really, like, literally a dumb jock. And I mean, I remember graduating from high school with honors, and people were like, "What? I didn't know you graduated." So it was like a really, for me, obvious path to be in science. And I just didn't even think twice. Obviously, I was going to do science at university. I just never thought there was any other option. I didn't know that it was going to be genetics, but I just, I was always sort of naturally inclined to science and learning and knowing. And I was always really curious, but I don't know, for whatever reason, I had this reputation of kind of being an idiot.
That's got to be one of the most unique origin stories I've heard on the Science Podcast so far. I love it. Okay, you got into genetics in a big way, obviously. What fascinated you about genetics as you started your undergrad and then went on further?
You know what, Jason? I've got a story for you. So
okay.
I got, you know how I got into genetics?
No, I'd love to know.
Administrative error.
Really?
So yeah, I did my first year at McEwen because I was playing basketball there. And I wasn't good enough to play at U of A. So back then it was McEwen Community College, and I played there for a year in the university transfer program. And then I transferred to U of A and wrote in, "What's your major or minor?" I was like, "Oh God, I don't know. Micro. I guess I liked micro as my major. That seemed like a cool subject in my first year bio. Genetics was okay. I liked that in high school. And I put microbiology as my major, genetics as my minor. I got my acceptance letter and it said genetics major, micro minor. So I called the admin office. I was like, I'm pretty sure, like, I swear I put this. And they pulled my file and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're right. You did. We mixed them up. That'll be $60 to change your major." I was going into second year university. I'm like, "I'm not giving you $60 to correct your mistake that you just admitted you did." So my stubbornness, my Ukrainianness, right? I was like, no, I'm just going to stay in genetics then. Fine. And so I did my first genetics class, and it just made sense to me. It's a subject where it's all abstract and about word problems. It's kind of like those grade 9 math problems where, like, Johnny's sister is 6 years older than her, and his youngest sister is, what, blah, blah, blah. What's their cousin's age?
Yeah.
And I was always good at those. I was just like instantly got those. And genetics is very much like that. I loved how it wasn't memorization based. It's all just concept, a lot of critical thinking. It just turns out I was good at it. And there's sometimes passion comes from passion, and sometimes passion comes from competence. And I was just good at it. It really resonated with me. And it was just it explained so much, and it was challenging, and it still is to me. And it's just so great in all its abstract, hard to imagine glory, and yet its utter simplicity of just like knowing meiosis and you got it figured. I just love all of it. It starts with such simple origins, and then the complexity just grows from there. Yeah.
Like what we teach in grade 9, for example, like meiosis, mitosis, and then it goes from there to like epigenetics, right?
Like, well, yeah, like I tell my students,
bananas.
Right? Like, exactly. I tell my students, I'm like, okay, we're going to do these like really complicated Punnett squares with really weird, outcomes and all this stuff. But just remember, it's like your mom had a green apple and a blue and a red apple, and she had to give you one of them, and that's it. That's all a Punnett square is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you just have to build from it. So it's a beautiful subject. It really is.
So like in the last 5 years, there's been huge breakthroughs with genetics I guess there's always been breakthroughs with genetics, but I want to say like in the last 5 years, there's been Nobel Prizes awarded to like CRISPR, all of this gene editing stuff. I've been talking to researchers and scientists on the podcast that study epigenetics. So my question to you is somebody who's excited about genetics and you teach at the University of Alberta, is there something in the future that you're most excited about in this field?
Beyond the Box. Our weekly podcast represents all of us that color outside the lines, that strive to escape the restraints that society places on us, and desire to see the world from a new perspective. I'm Carrie Woodcock, and you can join Dave Bain and myself as we open a dialogue for conversations that need to be had and bring awareness to issues that need to be addressed, all while challenging stigma and social norms. We each have our own unique blend of physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual components, and none of us fit neatly into any box. Join us as we expand our thinking and explore the gray area beyond the box.
Yes. And it's the stuff that also scares you.
Okay, so it's,
right?
it's a double-edged sword, flip coin thing.
Exactly. It's always the same thing. And we always talk about this genetics and lots of different fields. It's, it's the slippery slope. It's an incredible discovery and application in the right hands and terrible in the wrong hands. I love the idea of synthetic biology and being able to really design particularly bacteria from scratch and put together a genome that can do work for us, like synthesize drugs, and without any of the confounding problems that we have with trying to use a complicated life form to do it. We can use a simplistic engineered life form to do, and again, sort of, just one cell. It's not really scary. We're not growing drones of humans. But the synthetic biology stuff I think is really cool. CRISPR has so much promise and so many problems still achieving that promise. I hope it turns out better than gene therapy. I hope we can cure things like single gene defects. We've talked about sickle cell anemia, Huntington's disease, certain types of Alzheimer's, certain types of cholesterolemias, all these things. And you're like, oh my gosh, we could correct that. We could edit that. We could fix that typo in the genome.
Yeah, because it's just one error, right? I'm not a genetics person, but those are
lots
all
of diseases are just caused by one typo, one mistake.
Mm.
One letter is wrong in the billion or so letters that we have. So just go and fix that. And it's easier said than done, but it's exciting. It's definitely exciting, and I pay a lot of attention to it. The problem is that what I'm finding in a lot of fields, but particularly genetics, is things are happening so quickly that it's not hard to keep up if you're already a geneticist, but it's hard to access now. It's always been hard. Genetics has always been a difficult subject, but it's getting harder and harder because as soon as you start talking about CRISPR or epigenetics and all that, the next level, really complicated stuff, it becomes really hard to me as also a scientific reporter report it in a way that people really understand and aren't scared about it, because it does sound amazing and scary at the same time, and then you don't get to the point where you can say, look, this is how amazing it is and this is why it's not scary. So it's really hard. I don't get to report on it as much. I don't get to talk to the experts in the field as much as I'd like to, because it's just so inaccessible, but cool.
Now, are you talking is it inaccessible for a couple reasons? Just like the knowledge base is just exploding, or it's technology too, just having access to this stuff?
Both. Yeah.
Both. Okay.
I mean, exactly. So there's the labs are becoming more and more specialized. So they don't, and this is a trend in all sciences, but the labs are becoming so specialized in such a niche area that you end up not always, it's hard to tackle the big problems because you've got so many tiny little areas, avenues that you're exploring. So it's hard to explain the why of some of this research. Because I know why as a geneticist, but my gosh, to try and pull that out and explain it even to a fourth year class, it becomes really difficult. And also it's inaccessible because it's hard. It's just hard. It's hard to imagine, even I get blown away with the size of the genome. I think about it sometimes and I think about DNA and I think about some things that are happening in my genome right now. And I'm like, whoa, I don't get it. It's so complicated.
It is so hard to explain to kids. They get like, okay, you can say DNA, like when a cell divides, the DNA duplicates, and they're like, okay. And then you try, like, that's magic kind of already. But then you try to explain there's like a fact checking system that checks your DNA as being like duplicated properly, and it will like switch stuff in and out. And they're like, how does it know? And I'm like, I don't know. It just does it. Like, that's beyond.
And then some of those pages,
like it's so weird.
They always think about like this instruction manual on how to build a human, right? And that's the genome. And there's some mistakes in it. And there's this like active, constant spell check. And then there's a couple of pages that are glued together, and that's epigenetics. And you're like, what? Well, then how do you access it? And we're like, we don't know. We don't know what unglues it.
Yeah, it randomly
awesome.
It will open at times. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
So weird. Huh. So are you on the page of being a more realist with the pie in the sky genetic stuff in the next 10 to 20 years? Or do you think we'll get to the low hanging fruit of those simple error switches and get rid of some diseases with one typo?
I'm a realist. Okay. I'll tell you this much. I don't want to reveal my age too much, but no, I was in school when the Human Genome Project, the race for the sequencing the first human genome, and I was into it, right? And I was like, this is gonna solve everything, and this is the future, and that was a part of my like the motivation in genetics. Genetics was a sexy topic, 20 years ago. And I've seen a lot of that come to fruition, undoubtedly. But I also see a lot of it go, no, we didn't quite figure that part out. And then I went through undergrad during the gene therapy trials, and we had major setbacks with the death of Jesse Gelsinger, who was a part of a trial of gene therapy. And with all this promise, and saw it, certainly again, fulfill lots of promise, but not the pie in the sky stuff. So I see that still with the CRISPRs and all these kinds of new technologies coming out. I see the splash and the promise to the everybody's. And then you start to say, okay, but the work that goes into 3D printing a kidney, genetic engineering, human heart to grow in culture. These are things that are incredible, and they might be possible, but the tiny steps along the way are almost more fascinating to me, because then I start to go, okay, well, what are the roadblocks? And so that's where I've just been, I've been around long enough to know that realism is a really important trait, and I try not to overpromise.
Yeah. I've watched the first couple videos of CRISPR, because again, like that's not something I'm trained in. It was a new thing. I was like, whoa, it can do anything. It can do everything. Like Gattaca is a possibility, and then the years have gone on, and it's, slowly doing some things, but not at the point where it's designing humans based on changing genes around.
And that's kind of a good thing, though.
Yeah, that would...
Right. Yeah. We don't want to do that. So the fact that it does have technical limitations and maybe not so much theoretical, that's not a bad thing.
That's not a bad thing. Yeah. We need our society to advance to a more equitable state before, some technology can start making super babies, because, the rich are going to be all over that in 2 seconds.
Yep.
So the other question I have for you, and you kind of mentioned that you do reporting. You have this. You're a radio host. You do reporting on CBC, and I believe you have your own show. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Right. So, so every week,
weekly,
on CBC Radio in Canada.
Yeah.
I'm the syndicated science columnist. So, as part of your afternoon show, I often say I'm just really the person between weather and traffic. Right. And you get a daily dose or a weekly dose of about 7 minutes of science. So I have the coolest job. That's my other job. And it's the coolest one in the world because, I'm talking to every week. I talk about the coolest science that's being done, but I also, most importantly, most valuable to me is that I interview the researchers behind the scenes and that have done the work. And I hear from them and we have these wonderful chats about their discoveries. And they're so generous with their time with me. And, they have to talk me through astrophysics if I'm going to report on that. Like they have to start from the very beginning. And they're so nice and so excited to have their work covered. And so I do that. And then I just present the incredible work that's done around the world every week on CBC as part of the afternoon show. I have been lucky enough to often get little holiday specials. So there's this last one I did for the September long weekend in Canada was about pets, right? And so I did all about our love of pets and why we love them so much and how dogs were domesticated. But that's another great little contract gig. And so whenever I get a cool idea, I talk to my producers in Toronto and I go, hey, I kind of want to do a special about, I did one on faith and that was incredible. The science behind it. I did one on lying. I did one on the future of food, just things that have piqued my interest over the years. And that I think there's, I talk about them on the radio in a small column and I go, God, there's a whole world of science behind this that is so incredible. I want to do one on sleep. That's my next one I want to pitch. And so I have this real creative outlet and I'm not bound to any format or timeline or deadlines necessarily. It's really, really fun. So that's kind of another part of my world of the things that I do.
Do you cut all of this to because I've listened to it? It's not live, is it? Like you cut it all together and then send it in, or am I getting that wrong? Some of it's live?
No, it's all recorded. Those holiday specials have to be recorded for sure. And so we do I usually takes me a couple of months to sort of slowly produce and get the experts and tell the stories and write it and host it and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. That's what I was thinking. Like it's like 7 minutes is vastly different than an entire show for radio.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so has anything that you've started gone because I run a podcast, right? And sometimes things go sideways, and those are the funnest stories. Those are the most fun stories to tell other people that do similar work as me. Is like, hey, this was a bananas thing that happened. I was wondering, do you have a story like that for us?
Hi, this is Ross, the host of Smells Like Humans, a show about interesting and quirky human behavior. We bring humor, empathy, and warmth to topics such as relationships, dating, work, self-compassion, weddings, phobias, aging parents, travel mishaps, death, and many more. Ever wonder what happens at a cuddle party? We talk about it. Free-range kids in restaurants? We've got some thoughts. Bedtime stories for adults? We're on it. Light, fun, unscripted conversation and personal stories. Please join us by clicking the link in the show notes.
Oh, I mean, there's I have lots of things that I've really messed up teaching. On the radio, I'm still quite proud of myself. I've yet to swear.
Oh, okay.
That's good. That's usually the one thing that is like the biggest fear. I have a huge potty mouth otherwise. I've managed to not show that on air. I've managed to swear in class by accident, but no, not on the radio. So that's good. There's radio is, and I do live radio and it's a deadline focused thing. And there have been times where I've been literally getting off the phone with the expert, cutting the interview, and I've got 20 minutes before I'm on air and I'm writing the whole column and I'm trying to figure out what I want to say. There's one that happened the other week. Oh my gosh, it was impossible. I couldn't believe it, how hard it was to get the story to go. And you pull it all together, but so far, at least, I don't want to reveal too much because, you don't want to see how the sausage is made, right?
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
And there are times when, right now I'm working from home and I'm doing my show from home and I think I'm going to keep it that way. But yeah, has my daughter barged in and my dog knocked the microphone over and sure, all those things have happened, all of them. And I just try and cover it up as best I can.
It's live. I mean, you'd think that from the pandemic and everybody having to work from home, if they had their job allowed it, they'd be more understanding of like a kid, Mom, where's the, and you're like, hey, because that happened on Zoom so often with people that were working.
Yeah. I did have once one of my dogs, Polo, came in and he just puts his paw on my thigh when I'm sitting down, and I'll just sit like that and I'll pet his head. But he caught the microphone cord.
Oh.
And it completely tipped over. I did manage to sort of catch it, so it just kind of felt like a weird mishap, like a weird like jostle, but it was fully like Polo pulling the microphone down.
Oh, I have to go down in a special room because the dogs are so curious. Like when I do the podcast, and they'll just come and Bunsen is so big when he pants, I can't. The mic just picks up his pant, right? And of course, you've got editing software. You can find a pant, and then it will find the pant throughout the entire audio signal. But it's like, why? Yeah. And then if you miss it, it's like you're talking in the background. You're like,
well, and then I've tried to keep the door closed, and it doesn't latch perfectly. So there's sometimes he'll just barge in. So Polo in particular is a bit of a bull in a china shop. And so he barges in, and he also slams the door open and it hits the wall. And anyways, Marco, my other dog, would never. He's the most polite dog you've ever met. He is the biggest gentleman. He doesn't pant. He doesn't drool. He's like, he should have a bow tie on him at all times. He would not push a door open. So I was like, okay, I got to really latch the door. Well, there's Polo on the outside now scratching at the door, which he's never really done. I'm like, I don't know. They're getting hungry. It's probably going to come and bug me now. But so I've tried both, and I'm like, I think it's better off that Polo barges in and I catch the door while I'm on air instead of scratching at the door.
The anxiety. Oh my! Because we do live shows on Twitter, but that's vastly different than the entire CBC audience across Canada. So
yeah, and then my husband's like, oh, just leave the dogs outside. I'm like, well, Polo again will howl at ambulances going by.
Oh my goodness.
So anyways,
well,
working from home.
This is a good segue because the next question I was going to ask you is one of our standard ones, and it's about pets. These are humorous anecdotes, but I was wondering if you have a memorable pet story you could share from your life. We always ask our guests to do that.
Oh gosh, I have so many. Okay, I'll tell you one story. The first one that comes to mind is this one. So I was going on a run around Horlack Park, which is one of our bigger public parks, but it was in that spring where
I know that park.
Yeah, right. And it's okay, in all fairness, and no one jump over me for this, it is an on-leash area. There's an off-leash area I had just come out of, and I hadn't quite gotten the dogs on the leash. Okay, but also it was completely dead. There was no one there because it was this spring melt, and it's just nasty out. It's icy or wet. Those are two options that you're running on. So no one was there except the Canada geese.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, the melt was so bad that there was like a puddle. It wasn't even a puddle. It was a lake. There's already a lake at Horlack. I know that. This was another one. It was in this depression, and it was big. And so I'm running along, and Marco, the perfect dog, takes off, and he never does. And I was like, what is happening? And then Polo kind of jaunts behind, and they go over this little hill, and I can't quite see them anymore. But then all I see is this water splashing up. And I'm like,
oh my goodness.
Oh my God. So I sprint over, I come up the crest of this little hill, and Marco has caught a goose.
Oh no. Oh no. It didn't fight back enough either.
And there was the whole flock there, and they all were just like, oh, well, we're going to sacrifice that guy. We don't like him. They weren't defending him at all. And so Marco catches this goose. I also really am not a huge fan of birds. I find them really unpredictable. And he's in the middle of this giant frozen puddle. So I'm like, okay, I'm calling them, yelling them. Then Polo's like, oh, fun. Marco, what do you have? So he charges in through this massive fake lake. And I'm like, okay, I've got to think about this. I don't want to run in with my shoes on because I'm going to have to run home in my wet, cold shoes. So I take my shoes off. I roll my pants up. I start running into this puddle to try and free this goose. And in all fairness, they weren't chomping down. They were playing. They caught this toy.
They caught it. Okay, yeah.
That's all. And but Marco, I'm yelling at Marco, and Marco turns his head while he's got a bit of the goose's wing in his mouth. And the goose's head starts racing, like swings around at my shins. And so I jump back. I almost fall over into this puddle because I don't want to get bit by this weird goose because they're terrifying.
They are
so
terrifying.
Finally I grab, and anyone who's likes Canada geese, come to Alberta. And so then, but I finally grab the dogs, and I grab Marco and I grab Polo, but they're still holding on to the goose.
Oh my goodness.
I finally got them free. So now I'm get them out of the puddle, and now I'm having to try and figure out, yes, now they're on a leash. I get them on a leash, but I can't put my shoes on because they're going to pull me off my feet to try and get this goose who was still alive. So I had to like walk away, tie them to a tree just to get my cold, wet shoes on. It was, oh my
Your
God.
feet must have been frozen.
They were frozen. I got home and they were still white. It was ridiculous. But anyways, the goose did wander off. There was a few feathers missing. I'm not sure. The coyotes probably got it later that evening, but they didn't kill it. There was no blood. They didn't seem to be hurt. But yeah, they were traumatizing this goose, and I did feel bad, but it was super embarrassing.
Our golden Beaker did that with our chicken Buster, and Buster's still alive. So like she like chased him around and like was biting him and ripping his feathers out while Bunsen just stood there and watched horrified. And I was trying to like scoop up this golden retriever. And Buster,
that makes me feel better though.
Yeah, Buster's still alive. So this is a year after. So I don't know. It depends.
Okay, we'll see. If it could fly, then it could get away from the coyotes that night. But there didn't seem to be any major injuries.
Oh my goodness, what a gong show.
That was so terrible.
You know, if there was TikTok, if somebody had videotaped that, you would have gone viral on TikTok, I guarantee you.
And I would have gotten in trouble because people were like, keep your dogs on a leash. I'm like, I know. But there was it was like 1 meter past, where they heard this goose and they took off up from the off leash area. So anyway.
What a funny story. Thanks for sharing. I love it.
Yeah.
The other standard question we ask our guests is for the super fact. It's something that that when you tell people, it kind of like blows their mind a bit. I was wondering if you had one for us, a super fact.
I got to pick one. 90% of your body's serotonin comes from microbes in your gut, and serotonin makes you feel good. So 90% of a fraction of your happiness, the happiness chemicals that flood your brain, actually comes from the healthy microbes that are in your gut, and that always catches me. That one.
Huh?
Did anyone have you said that one on your show yet?
No. But I was just going to say that I was just talking to my students a couple days ago about this connection that was not known before, but is now known. And there's like, because high school kids love gross stuff, just like, and so I was like, this is why there's poop therapy.
Yep.
So they take like healthy poop and put it in somebody who's not so healthy, so their microbes get a little bit better. And
I'll give a PSA to that though, because there's a lot of places that are doing very unlicensed and there's like these weird new age spa places that are doing it, and that's not where you go get fecal transplants. You get fecal transplants from a trained doctor, and they have been shown to work. So yes, it's an effective therapy, especially for things like Clostridium difficile, chronic infections.
Difficile, yeah.
Right. So I would just say the PSA there is, if you say, "Oh, I heard fecal transplants are great for improving your mood," I'll do it at the spa down the street. No.
My goodness, I'm sure. I think I saw Caulfield talk about that on Twitter. So
yeah, he's been big on that for sure.
Oh man, gross. It's kind of gross to begin with, but it's even more gross if it's like,
let's get real gross. Let's get real gross. How do you decide who has healthy poo?
If you're not a trained doctor, you guess. I don't know.
Right? And even the doctors don't know. So when it comes to fecal transplants, how do you know whose do you want?
I don't know. It's not like a
right.
Yeah.
So there's lots of work in there, and I love that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like how do you figure out whose transplant you want for that?
How would you ever know if you're just some random new age person? Like the energy they have walking in, like you look like a person that's got healthy poops. So that's super sketchy.
Right? So do it under supervision of a trained, not an MD, not any other doctor types, an MD who has specialty in the area.
I name dropped Caulfield because he's at the University of Alberta too.
Yeah.
And he's been on the show. And I have a hankering that you bump into him occasionally.
We cross paths a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
We often do little favors for each other at conferences, and
that's
I
so
ask
cool.
him to do this and he'll do that for me. And yeah, it's good. We have a good working relationship for sure.
Oh, that's cool. People are gonna think that's pretty awesome. Because he's been on the show a few times. Thanks for the super fact. That's super cool. And it led to a very good PSA, a super PSA. Maybe that should be a new segment on the podcast. But
what do your guests want everyone to know about their field? Yeah.
The last section of the interview is the important to you section. It's where we talk to our guest about hobbies or causes that they're really passionate about. And we were chatting, and you're a super busy person. You're passionate about your hobby of dog walking. What do you want to talk about there?
You know what? That's pretty much, it's the, I have, we haven't even gotten to a couple of my other jobs that I do. So I work a lot, and the dogs just sit there and they wait and they just plead and say, can I go for a run? Whatever you do, however much you're going to give me today, you're going to make me happy. And I get out rain or shine, and certainly in the freezing cold. I've got special dog walking boots for the middle of winter and all that kind of stuff. And we have an off-leash park near our house. So I get in there and they go running around, and it's about an hour. And it's my time. I think it's for a mom and work and all the things that I do. This is the one thing that always brings joy, right? The dogs are always happy to do that and participate in that. And it's just like time for myself. I sometimes listen to podcasts. I sometimes just think, I just get out in nature, and it's a real wilderness area in the ravine where I live. And it's just a great time to be alone. For a while, actually, my husband was in between jobs. He left one job and had some time before he started the next one. And so he started dog walking with me. And I can't say I loved it.
Oh, no.
Well, no, it was great to have that time with him. But at the same time, it was selfishly, we had time to chat over dinner. We can chat while we go golfing, whatever it is. It's that moment of the dog walk was just my time, and it's really sacred time. So it's the real time escape that I have away from responsibilities, which I need sometimes.
I guess if you'd always been the dog walker your entire relationship, it would be a big change.
And
all of a sudden.
Exactly. Like on the Sunday morning dog walks, I'm not kicking them out. I'm just saying that on my Monday morning at 10 a.m. when the dogs are, getting a little restless, I'm like, okay, this is my time. It's great.
That is important. There's a lot of research that's going into mental health, right? Dogs are one thing that really helps with that, but also being unplugged and being mindful and just like experiencing the present rather than worrying about the past or the future. I have this wonderful opportunity to get out in nature. Yeah. And listen to the birds. Yeah. Right. So I'm nature bathing. I'm unplugging. I'm doing all those things that are so good for just resetting. And I really take it very seriously. Yeah. And all of this stuff isn't floofy nonsense. Like there's clinical studies that have shown drops in cortisol and blood pressure from nature dogs and mindfulness. So exactly. Yeah, you got a trifecta there going on. And then if you spend like 5 minutes looking into your dog's eyes later, that also drops your cortisol levels. So yeah, just look in those big brown eyes and just. That's right. And folks at home, if you don't have a dog, just follow Bunsen and Beaker and you can look into their eyes. Get the stuffy. Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Get this. That's right. I haven't even thought about doing a plug for that. So thanks. You're welcome. And I have to give you props from naming your dogs Marco and Polo. That is, as you know, I'm a big fan of the naming the two dogs in kind of a pairing way. So very cute.
Yep. It was always the plan.
It was always the plan. Okay. Yeah. Our plan was never to get a Beaker though. We had Bunsen, and then just by a whole bunch of random coincidences, during the pandemic, we wound up with a golden retriever puppy. And oh my goodness, it was the greatest thing that ever happened. So,
yeah, everyone always says like, oh, 2 dogs just means double the poop to pick up in the yard. I'm like, yeah, but it's double the fun and the fluff. Yeah. And my dogs don't shed, so I don't have double the hair problem. So that's good.
We have Shed Mageddon at our house. We have a Bernese Mountain Dog who's basically like a bear, and then a golden retriever that sheds constantly every day of her life. So
do you just like knit a blanket every night?
Well, we're lucky our main floor is tile, so I just like take a broom and just shove it all to the sucker thing. Yeah. And, we've got one of those like kick plate things. But if I forget about the stairs, I come back in a week later, there's enough hair in the corners to make another animal. And I'm like, ooh, I'm sure glad we didn't have company today. Ugh. Well, we're at the end of the interview. Torah, thanks so much for being our guest tonight. This was hilarious and uplifting, and learned about some genetics and put a realistic spin on some of the stuff we hear in the news. Just for folks listening, can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, I'm at Dr. Torah Kachur, DrTorahKachur, not the easiest name to spell. Dr. Torah Kachur on Twitter, and that's kind of the only social media that I really have that certainly I do any science in. I'm on Instagram, but that's just to follow my family. So It's really boring.
And your CBC show, when does it come on? When can people listen to you?
So if you're in Canada, I air Thursdays during the afternoon segment, but the way it works is a little bit more complicated. I'm syndicated. So I'll talk to the Edmonton show at 4:07 p.m., but also I've already talked to the Ottawa show at 4:45 Eastern. So I have different times. So it depends on what market you're in, or whether you can hear it, but it's usually posted online with the Edmonton, it's CBC Listen Radioactive, I think is the word for it. And you can listen to there.
Does CBC, do they turn all the radio shows into a podcast? That's like the thing now.
No.
Do you know? You don't know? Okay.
They don't do that with the columnists.
Okay.
And I wish they did.
Okay. You know what, folks? We'll try our best to have some links to all of that. Okay. Take care, Torah.
Thank you.
Well, that's the end of another Science Pawdcast episode. No family section this week by Adam because the poor guy got his wisdom teeth out this week, and he is in no position to be recording a podcast. So he's healing. You'll hear him next week for the family section. Special thanks to our guest this week, Dr. Torah Kachur, who talked to us about genetics, but also some hilarious dog stories. We'd also like to give a shout out to the top tier Paw Pack members, the adult tier. They support us on our community, the Paw Pack. Chris, take it away.
Elizabeth Bourgeois, Peggy McKeel, Mary LaMagna Ryder, Helen Chin, Holly Burge, Sandy Breimer, Brenda Clark, Andrew Lynn, Marianne McNally, Karen Beth St. George, Catherine Jordan, Tracy Domingue, Diane Allen, Julie Smith, Terry Adam, Shelley Smith, Jennifer Smathers, Laura Stephenson, Tracy Leanbaugh, Courtney Proven, Fun Lisa, Ben Rathert, Jody Ogren, Brianne Haas, Bianca Hyde, Debbie Anderson, Anne Uchida, Donna Craig, Amy C., Susan Wagner, Kathy Zerker, and Liz Button.
For science, empathy, and cuteness.